The chill of the crypt bit into Kalen, a stark contrast to the burning rage in his gut. Dust motes danced in the sparse shafts of moonlight filtering through cracks in the collapsing ceiling, illuminating grotesque gargoyles and forgotten altars. This forsaken place, known only as the Crypt of Whispers, was supposed to hold the answers he desperately sought, a hidden relic said to break the curse that clung to his family like a shroud. He moved with the silent grace of a seasoned hunter, his leather armor flexing with every cautious step, his hand never straying far from the hilt of his father's old sword. He wasn't looking for trouble, not really. His only goal was the ancient artifact, rumored to reside deep within this vampire-infested ruin. But trouble, it seemed, had a way of finding Kalen. A low, guttural growl echoed from deeper within, followed by the clanking of chains. Kalen froze, pressing himself against a crumbling pillar. This wasn't the usual mindless drone of the undead guards he dispatched on his way in. This was different. He crept forward, his boots crunching on millennia of dust and debris, until he reached a cavernous chamber. And then he saw her. Chains, thick and dark, wrapped around her, binding her to a colossal obsidian throne. Her form was regal even in captivity, clad in dark ornate armor that seemed to be part of her very skin. Great, bat-like wings, crimson-edged and magnificent, were stretched taut, held by enchanted manacles that pulsed with a faint, malevolent light. Her head was bowed, strands of platinum hair falling across her face, obscuring her features, but Kalen could feel the immense, ancient power radiating from her, even in her weakened state. She was a vampire, undoubtedly, but not just any vampire. This was a queen. The vampire Queen Lyra. Legends whispered of her, of the Crimson Empire she ruled with an iron fist, of the rivers of blood and the fear she commanded. Kalen had seen the devastation her kind wrought, the empty villages, the terrified whispers that spoke her name. Yet, seeing her like this, trapped and vulnerable, stirred something unexpected within him. Pity? No, not pity. A hunter's instinct, perhaps. Or the morbid curiosity of a man who stood before a living legend. Suddenly her head snapped up. Her eyes, pools of a startling, vibrant crimson, locked onto his. A jolt, sharp and electric, shot through Kalen. It wasn't just a look, it was a connection, a profound and unsettling acknowledgement that went beyond mere sight. He felt a fleeting glimpse of her pain, her rage, her ancient weariness, and then it was gone, replaced by a searing intensity that threatened to burn through his very soul. Mortal. Her voice was a low, melodic growl, a whisper that vibrated through the very stones of the crypt. You trespass where you do not belong. He didn't move, couldn't. I seek an artifact, he managed, his voice a little rougher than he intended. Nothing more. A slow, humorless smile stretched across her lips, revealing glints of elongated canines. Do you think anything of value would be left unguarded in my personal dungeon? Her gaze swept over his sword, his determined stance. You have courage, I'll give you that. Or perhaps just ignorance. A sudden tremor shook the crypt. More dust rained down. Kalen glanced up, a sense of urgency pressing in. The ancient structure was truly collapsing. He had to find what he came for and leave. The chains, he heard himself say to his own surprise. Why are you? Lyra let out a short, bitter laugh. A betrayal, mortal. A powerful one from within my own court. They thought to drain my power, to leave me here to rot, as this crumbling edifice collapses around me. Her eyes narrowed. But I will not die so easily. Not by their hand, and certainly not by a mere tremor. Another, stronger tremor. A section of the ceiling above Lyra cracked ominously. Stones began to rain down, narrowly missing her. She recoiled, a flash of something akin to fear, or perhaps just annoyance, in her crimson eyes. The magic binding her, Kalen realized, wasn't just physical. It was draining her, keeping her weak. The collapse would simply finish the job. He should leave. His quest, his family's curse, his sister Ilara waiting for him, these were his priorities. This queen, this monster was not his concern. Yet, as he looked at her, truly looked, he saw not just a predator, but a being of immense power brought low, cornered. And for a moment he saw himself in her eyes, a fight for survival, a will to endure. What do you want, mortal? She asked, her voice laced with an impatience that hinted at her diminishing strength. Speak quickly before this tomb becomes our shared grave. He hesitated for a fraction of a second. The artifact he sought was likely lost in this destruction. His chances of finding it now were slim to none. But a flicker of an idea, dangerous and reckless, sparked in his mind. I can free you, Kalen said, the words surprising even himself. Lyra's crimson eyes widened, a mixture of disbelief and a spark of raw hope flashing within them. You? A lone mortal? Against centuries of binding magic? She scoffed, but the tremor in her voice was unmistakable. What price, hunter? What could a mortal possibly demand of a queen? No price, Kalen replied, taking a step closer. Just a debt owed. A debt he didn't even know if she could pay, a fleeting, desperate thought that maybe, just maybe, freeing a creature of such power could somehow help him with his own impossible task. It was illogical, insane, but the idea had taken root. He examined the chains, seeing the faint, intricate runes etched into their surface, glowing with a sickly green light. Magic, dark and ancient. His father's sword, a relic in itself, wasn't just steel, it was imbued with a faint, protective aura, a legacy passed down through generations of vampire hunters. He had never used it against such powerful magic, but he had to try. Stay still, he commanded, drawing his sword. The blade hummed faintly in the oppressive air. Lyra watched him, her expression a careful mask of skepticism, yet with an undeniable flicker of desperate anticipation. You overestimate your blade, mortal? Kalen ignored her. He focused on the nearest chain, pressing the flat of his blade against the glowing runes. A searing pain shot up his arm, and the crypt groaned louder, the ceiling showering them with more debris. He gritted his teeth, pouring his will into the blade. He felt a faint resistance, a psychic pushback, but his sword, old and true, held. The green light around the rune flickered, then dimmed. He pressed harder, a guttural sound escaping his lips. With a sharp crack, the first rune shattered, and the chain loosened, falling away from Lyra's wrist with a metallic clang. Her eyes widened further, a gasp escaping her lips. The faintest flush of color returned to her pale cheeks. Impossible. Another chain, another rune. Each one a battle, each one draining Kalen's strength, sending shocks of pain through him. But with every broken link, Lyra seemed to gain a fraction of her power back, her crimson eyes growing brighter, more intense. The air around them began to thrum with a dark energy, her latent magic stirring. Finally, with a final agonizing effort, Kalen severed the last rune. The heavy, enchanted chains fell to the ground with a deafening crash, echoing through the crumbling crypt. A powerful wave of dark energy exploded outwards from Lyra, throwing Kalen backwards. He hit a pillar hard, his head ringing, his sword clattering to the ground. Lyra rose from the throne, slowly, majestically. Her dark armor seemed to mend itself, her magnificent red wings unfurled, stretching to their full, terrifying span, pushing against the crypt's low ceiling. Power radiated from her in an almost palpable wave, a storm of ancient magic and raw fury. She was magnificent, terrifying, and utterly breathtaking. She looked down at Kalen, who was struggling to push himself up, dazed and disoriented. Her gaze was no longer just intense, it was something else entirely. It was a gravitational pull, an unbreakable focus. As Kalen met her gaze, a profound, undeniable shift occurred. He felt a sudden, inexplicable connection, a tightening in his chest, a warmth spreading through his veins that had nothing to do with pain or exertion. It was as if a part of his very being had intertwined with hers, a silent, invisible thread linking them forever. This was no ordinary rescue. He hadn't just freed the vampire queen. He had bound them both. Lyra descended from the throne, her movements fluid and deadly. She stood over him, her shadow engulfing him. You saved me, mortal, she purred, her voice now rich with power, a dangerous silk. Her eyes, fixed solely on him, held an unnerving intensity. No one has ever done that. She reached out a pale, elegant hand not to strike but to touch his face. Her fingers, cold as marble, traced the line of his jaw. The touch sent shivers down his spine, a mixture of fear and a strange, unfamiliar thrill. And now, she continued, her lips curving into a slow, possessive smile, I find I cannot stop thinking about you. A final, violent tremor ripped through the crypt. The ceiling above them began to cave in completely, giant stone blocks plummeting downwards. Lyra didn't flinch. Her eyes never left Kalen's. Come, she commanded, not asking but stating. This tomb is no longer our home. You are mine now. She pulled him up with surprising strength, his body reacting without conscious thought, drawn to her. Just as the crypt completely collapsed behind them, swallowing the ancient throne and their recent past in a cloud of dust and falling stone, Lyra spread her powerful wings. With Kalen firmly held by her side, she ascended into the night sky, a dark, crimson-winged silhouette against the pale moon. Kalen could feel the wind whipping past them, the dizzying height, the sheer impossibility of the situation. He was a human, flying through the night, held by the creature he was supposed to hunt, the queen of all vampires. And in the depths of his being he knew with a chilling certainty that his life and his heart would never be the same. The curse he sought seemed insignificant now, overshadowed by the new, terrifying, and utterly captivating bond he had just forged. He had saved the vampire queen. And she couldn't stop thinking about him. Neither, he realized with a jolt, Could he stop thinking about her? The flight was a blur of crimson wings and rushing air. Kaelin clung to Lyra's side, the immense power of her ascent stealing his breath. Below them, the world rushed by, a patchwork of dark forests and moonlit ruins, all shrinking rapidly beneath the terrifying majesty of the vampire queen. He felt strangely weightless, suspended between the terrifying reality of his situation and the sheer dizzying thrill of being carried by a creature of legend. Lyra, however, seemed entirely unmoved by the physics of their flight, her gaze focused on the horizon where a cluster of jagged dark spires pierced the night sky, the unmistakable silhouette of the Crimson Citadel. "Hold tight, mortal," she murmured, her voice barely audible over the wind, yet carrying a resonance that vibrated through his very bones. The words were a warning and instruction, and Kaelin realized with a chill, a possessive claim. He glanced up at her face. The regal features were sharp, pale, and utterly devoid of the weakness he had witnessed moments ago. Her crimson eyes, though still fixed on the destination, occasionally flickered down to him. It wasn't curiosity he saw there, but a deep, unnerving preoccupation. It was the look of someone who had just acquired a rare and unexpected treasure. "The bond," Kaelin finally managed to choke out, his voice hoarse from the wind. "What did I do?" Lyra's lips curled into a predatory smile. "You, little hunter, did the unimaginable. The chains that held me were not merely iron. They were forged with an ancient blood curse, designed to sever my connection to the life force of my empire and ensure my slow, agonizing demise." Her grip on him tightened, a surprisingly gentle but firm pressure on his arm. "When your blood, the blood of a descendant of old hunters, came into contact with the shattered remnants of that curse, it didn't just free me. It rewove the magic." She paused, turning her head slightly so that her breath, cold and strangely sweet, brushed his ear. "It created a knot of souls, Kaelin. A magical tether that links my mind, my emotions, and my very will to yours. The fools who bound me wanted to drain my power. You, in your unwitting heroism, became the new anchor." Kaelin swallowed hard. This was worse than any family curse. "A knot of souls, what does that mean?" "It means," Lyra stated simply, the word dripping with an almost disturbing delight, "that where I go you go. What I feel you sense. And most importantly, mortal, I will always know where you are, and I will be consumed by the need to have you near." "I saved the vampire queen," she quoted his thoughts, an unnerving proof of their psychic connection. "And now I can't stop thinking about you." It is quite literal. The revelation hit him like a physical blow. He was psychically bound to the most powerful, ancient vampire in the world. He was no longer a free man, he was a walking addiction for a queen. Before he could process the full terror of this, they arrived. The Crimson Citadel loomed over them, a monstrous edifice of black stone and Gothic terror, lit by braziers burning with eternal red fire. Lyra swept down, landing lightly on a massive platform overlooking the city of vampires and their thralls. The moment their feet touched the stone, Kaelin felt a wave of hostile, focused energy wash over him. Dozens of figures, clad in black armor similar to Lyra's own but lacking her ornate majesty, stood guard. They were tall, pale, and utterly devoid of human warmth. Vampires. A figure immediately detached from the line and approached. He was as tall as Lyra, perhaps taller, with sharp, arrogant features and cold, calculating dark eyes. His armor was richly detailed, second only to the queen's. This was Lord Valerius. Lyra's previous smile vanished, replaced by a cold, murderous fury that Kaelin instantly felt echoed in his own mind, a fierce, protective rage on Lyra's behalf. The knot of souls was already working its insidious magic. "Lyra," Valerius purred, a false sincerity coating his voice. "I see you have miraculously escaped the unfortunate incident in the crypt. I was just preparing the search parties." Lyra stepped forward, pushing Kaelin slightly behind her, a clear shield against the court's scrutiny. "Save your false piety, Valerius. I know your work. The chains, the betrayal, it was yours." Valerius raised an eyebrow, a picture of wounded innocence. "My queen, I live only to serve you. These accusations wound me. Who is this mortal you bring into the heart of our court? A pet?" His eyes, devoid of warmth, raked over Kaelin with undisguised contempt. "He is Kaelin," Lyra stated, her voice like steel. "And he is my savior. He broke the chains you forged. He is now bound to me. And by the laws of the blood bond, he is under my absolute personal protection. Any harm that comes to him is harm directed at me." Valerius's mask slipped for a fleeting second. The look of cold shock that crossed his face was priceless. He understood the gravity of the blood bond, the unwritten ancient law of the vampire court. Lyra was not just claiming Kaelin, she was making him an extension of her own immortal life. "Bound?" Valerius scoffed, recovering quickly. "A mortal bound to the queen? This is unprecedented, Lyra. His presence is an insult to the Crimson bloodline, a weakness in the throne room. His presence, Lyra countered, taking Kaelin's arm and drawing him closer, a deliberate act of public intimacy that sent a fresh wave of hostility through the watching guards, is a reminder that even the deepest betrayals can be overturned by the most unexpected intervention. He is here, Valerius, and he is not going anywhere. She turned, finally facing Kaelin completely, the intensity of her focus making the entire hostile court fade into the background. You are tired, Kaelin. But you will stay close. Valerius here is the architect of my near demise. He will be watching you, waiting for a single misstep. She gave him a look that was both a promise and a threat. Do not disappoint me. Your new life begins now. And with that, Queen Lyra, clutching her human savior, marched through the immense black iron gates and into the heart of the Crimson Citadel, leaving Lord Valerius and the rest of the shocked court behind to whisper and plot. Kaelin realized he had traded one fight for another, exchanging the collapsing ruins of a crypt for the deadly political labyrinth of a vampire's inner court. And this time his survival was intrinsically tied to the very queen who held him captive, body, mind, and soul. The citadel was less a palace and more a monument to eternal darkness. Its corridors were vast, silent, and chillingly cold, lined with polished black stone that reflected the flickering light of blood-red torches. The air itself tasted metallic and ancient, a thick blend of incense and centuries of undeath. Kaelin felt completely alien, his mortal heart beating a frantic, loud rhythm in a world where everything else was unnervingly still. Lyra led him deep into the heart of the fortress, her steps echoing with an authority that brooked no challenge. The vampire guards they passed, immense figures draped in black, lowered their heads in perfect synchronicity, their hostile gazes fixed on the human she clutched. The sense of dread was suffocating, yet the bond, the knot of souls, drew him irresistibly towards the queen. Every time his fears spiked, a strange, soothing calmness would wash over him, Lyra's own dominating will instinctively smoothing his distress. She brought him not to a dungeon but to her personal chambers, a sprawling suite furnished with dark velvet, intricate silverwork, and a colossal bed draped in crimson silks. It was opulent, yet lacked any semblance of comfort. A sanctuary for a queen, not a home. You will stay here, Lyra stated, releasing his arm to shed her heavy mantle. She turned, her armor gleaming in the torchlight, her crimson eyes holding his captive. Do not confuse this reprieve with freedom. You are a vulnerability now, a beacon that tells the world the vampire queen has a weakness. And my court is full of predators, Kaelin. He finally found his voice, laced with bitter resignation. I am aware, Your Majesty. Valerius seems keen to prove that point. Lyra's smile was a terrifying flash of sharp teeth. Valerius is a flea I will eventually crush. But he is a useful diversion. She moved closer, closing the small distance between them until he could smell the faint, intoxicating scent of musk and dry blood that clung to her. The bond, she whispered, her voice low and intimate, a sound that bypassed his ears and resonated in his chest. It is already adjusting. When you are near, the psychic noise is manageable. But when you are away, she reached out and touched the rapidly fading bruise on his shoulder from the debris, a shiver running through him. I feel an emptiness, a profound need that demands your presence. It is inconvenient, infuriating, and yet, compelling. He met her gaze, refusing to back down, the hunter in him challenging the queen. I have a life outside these walls, Lyra. People. I have a sister, Ilara. The mention of another name, another human connection, seemed to strike a nerve. Lyra's expression hardened, and a cold wave of possessiveness, sharp as ice, slammed into Kaelin's mind via the bond. Ilara, she repeated the name, tasting it like venom. The sister you went into the crypt to save. The sister whose pathetic, mortal curse you sought to break with a trinket. Lyra chuckled, a brittle, cruel sound. Foolish mortal devotion. You will forget her, Kaelin. There is no room in my world for such distractions. I will never forget her, he insisted, though the psychic pressure from Lyra was making his head ache. And if you harm her. I won't, she interrupted, the promise more terrifying than any threat. Not yet. She is an excellent tether. She represents what you still cling to, what makes you you. Breaking that bond too quickly would shatter the exquisite thing you have accidentally gifted me. She walked over to a table where a goblet of dark liquid rested. But know this, she is a bargaining chip, and the moment she becomes a true liability, the moment she tries to steal you back, I will erase her. Lyra picked up the goblet and offered it to him. Drink. It is fortified with specific herbs. It will help your mortal body cope with the constant drain and influence of the bond. And it will ensure that you remain mortal for a little while longer. Kaelin hesitated, staring at the dark liquid. Poison? A further binding spell? But the need to keep his mind clear, to fight the creeping influence of the bond, won out. He snatched the goblet and downed the contents in a single gulp. It tasted earthy and bitter, leaving a tingling sensation in his throat. Good, Lyra said, a satisfied glint in her eyes. Now you need rest. Your body is still reeling from breaking the curse chains. My servant will bring you fresh attire. You will bathe. You will eat. And then, you will not leave these chambers without me. She pointed to a closed, carved door in the corner of the room. That leads to a private sitting area. You will sleep there. Remember, Kaelin. The world thinks I was near death. My court is looking for weakness. Your presence here, your survival, and my inexplicable favoritism towards you, is the single greatest scandal in the history of the Crimson Empire. Use that to your advantage. Or simply follow my every command. Lyra turned away, walking towards a massive, mirrored vanity, her attention seemingly shifting to her appearance. But Kaelin could still feel the cold, sharp presence of her mind in his, a constant, low-frequency hum of awareness and possessiveness. He was in the heart of the beast, bound to its queen, and the only hope of survival was playing a game of loyalty he didn't even understand. He walked over to the closed door she had indicated, running a hand over the cold, intricate carvings. Inside he could hear the faint sound of running water, a bathroom perhaps, but his hand stalled on the latch. He was now a prize in a dangerous court, the obsession of the powerful queen, and the target of her disgruntled consort, Valerius. His rescue of Lyra had not saved him. It had merely started the clock on a far grander, more lethal destiny. Kaelin spent the next 2 days in a gilded cage. Lyra's private chambers were suffocatingly silent, save for the occasional soft footfall of the servant who brought him rich, unfamiliar food and wine. He bathed, he changed into the fine dark tunic provided, but his mind remained sharp, alert, and deeply troubled. The worst part was the knot of souls. It wasn't just a physical tether, it was an emotional invasion. Lyra's presence in his mind was a constant, distracting current. He felt the cold, ancient weight of her power, the coiled tension of her fury towards Valerius, and most disturbingly, the constant, low-burning satisfaction of having him near. Whenever he consciously tried to focus on his own life, on his sister Elara, on the world he had left behind, Lyra's emotion would flare. A sharp, aggressive wave of possessiveness that blurred his focus and left him feeling detached from his own memories. He knew she was testing him, waiting for him to break. He kept his silence, spending his hours staring out of the tall, narrow windows at the vast, desolate landscape surrounding the citadel. On the third day, the silence was broken by a cold, formal announcement. My Queen Lyra requires your presence in the Grand Hall. The servant, a nervous, pale thrall named Silas, whispered, his eyes wide with fear. It is the formal address to the court regarding the recent instability. Kaelin knew what this meant. Lyra was going to present him to the rest of the court, a political move to solidify her power and demonstrate the permanence of his binding. And if Valerius was indeed a plotter, this was his chance. When he entered the Grand Hall, the sheer scale of the assembled court was staggering. Hundreds of vampires, of varying age and power, stood or reclined in the vast space, their eyes following Kaelin as if he were a particularly interesting piece of meat. The air was thick with ancient judgment and cold malice. Lyra was on the throne, magnificent and terrible. She wore her full regalia, a crown of sharp, black iron, and a gown that seemed woven from shadows and blood. She looked every inch the merciless ruler. Kaelin walked slowly towards the throne, every instinct screaming at him to run. As he reached the dais, Lyra extended a hand. He was compelled by the bond to take it. Her touch was icy, sending a jolt of power through him. My children, Lyra's voice boomed, amplified by the hall's oppressive acoustics. You have heard the whispers. You know that I was betrayed, imprisoned, and left to die in the crypt of whispers. My former consort, Lord Valerius, she paused, her voice dripping venom as her crimson eyes fixed on the antagonist, who stood perfectly composed to the side of the dais, is the author of this treachery. A low murmur rippled through the court. Valerius stepped forward, his face a perfect mask of aggrieved dignity. My queen, my innocence is self-evident. You were released by an agent of your own enemies. This mortal you champion is undoubtedly part of a coordinated attack to undermine your rule. He gestured dramatically towards Kaelin. I demand a trial by blood. Let this human prove his loyalty or face the eternal flame. Lyra squeezed Kaelin's hand, a silent command to hold his ground. Her thoughts, a mix of contempt and sharp, strategic calculation, flooded Kaelin's mind. He wants me to kill you now, Kaelin. To prove the bond is a lie. Do not give him the satisfaction. The bond is unbreakable, Valerius, Lyra stated, her voice icy. He saved me. That is the only proof I require. He is Kaelin and he is my anchor. His life is my power. Then let his anchoring be tested. Valerius challenged, his voice rising, appealing directly to the court's ancient skepticism. A mortal is a mortal, my queen. A flash of weakness that will fade. Let us see if this knot of souls is stronger than the simple human desire for freedom. Valerius snapped his fingers. From the crowd, 2 armored guards dragged forward a figure, bound and gagged. Kaelin's blood ran cold. He didn't need to see the face clearly. The small stature, the tangled, dark hair, the desperate panic in the figure's eyes. It was Alara. The psychic current between Lyra and Kaelin exploded. Lyra was momentarily surprised, her fury at Valerius mixing with a cold, almost detached curiosity about Kaelin's reaction. But Kaelin was completely overwhelmed. The sight of his sister, the only reason he had ever entered the crypt, triggered a rush of pure, undiluted human love, fear, and protective rage. Alara. Kaelin roared, ripping his hand free from Lyra's grasp. Lyra gasped, physically recoiling from the sudden, powerful emotional break. The knot of souls, for the first time, stretched and pulsed with agonizing pain. Valerius, you dare. Lyra spat, rising from her throne, her crimson wings twitching in fury. Valerius smiled, a chilling, triumphant smirk. The human weakness, my queen. It is fascinating. You claim his life is your power, yet the presence of his blood kin shatters his composure. Choose Kaelin. Choose your mortal sister, and prove to the court that the queen's claim is built on sand. Or choose the queen, and watch your kin burn for your disloyalty to humanity. The 2 guards held Alara over a massive iron grating in the floor, a forge that glowed with molten heat. Alara's muffled cries were the only sound in the silent hall. Kaelin felt a terrifying internal struggle. One side of his mind, the human, pure side, screamed to save Alara, to sacrifice everything for the only family he had left. The other side, the side influenced by the bond, felt Lyra's sharp need, her fear of humiliation, and an almost overwhelming compulsion to return to her side. He took a frantic step towards Alara, but a sudden, intense pain shot through his skull. Lyra was asserting her control. The bond was a leash and she was pulling it tight. Stop, Kaelin. Lyra commanded, her voice raw with both anger and sudden, desperate fear. The pain Kaelin felt was being mirrored in her, a testament to the unbreakable connection. Return to me. She is nothing. I am your queen. Your life. But seeing Alara's terrified, pleading eyes, Kaelin made his choice. He fought through the psychic agony, his inherent humanity rising up against the bond. He lunged past Lyra, sprinting towards his sister. Alara. Valerius's smile broadened. Disloyal, he shouted, giving the signal. The guard started to tip Alara towards the grating. Just as Kaelin reached them, ready to throw himself into the molten heat to save her, Lyra's power exploded. A wave of raw, scarlet energy slammed into Kaelin's back, paralyzing him mid-stride. He collapsed just shy of the grating, his body locked, the bond now a searing white-hot wire in his chest. Lyra descended from her throne like a striking serpent. She landed beside the petrified guards, her face a mask of cold, terrifying wrath. She is my property, Valerius, Lyra hissed, her voice a low, lethal whisper. You used my anchor, my possession, as a pawn against me. This is not a test of his loyalty but of mine. With a swift, impossibly fast movement, Lyra struck. Not at Alara but at the 2 guards. In a sickening crunch, she snapped their necks with her bare hands, their bodies collapsing lifelessly. She then turned her venom on Valerius, who finally took a step back, a flicker of genuine alarm crossing his face. You have overstepped, consort, Lyra declared, her voice ringing with finality. My patience has ended. She didn't kill him. Instead, she pointed a single trembling finger at Valerius. From this moment, you are exiled. You will be stripped of your titles, your power, and your access to the court. If your shadow falls upon this citadel again, you will be hunted to final death. Valerius stared, his ambition turning into pure hatred. This is madness, Lyra. To risk a kingdom for a single, pathetic mortal? You will regret this. With a glare of promised revenge at both Lyra and Kaelin, he turned and stalked out, his pride broken but his malice very much intact. The entire court was silent, reeling from the sudden political bloodshed. Lyra stood over the unconscious Alara, her chest heaving. She looked down at Kaelin, still paralyzed on the floor, her crimson eyes blazing with a confusing mix of fury, protection, and overwhelming relief. She knelt, her elaborate armor scraping the stone. She put a hand on his cheek, the coldness grounding his racing heart. You chose her, Lyra whispered, her voice laced with pain and a terrifying vulnerability. You tried to break the bond for a fragile mortal. She didn't punish him physically. Instead, she pressed her lips against his ear, her voice dropping to a seductive, possessive hiss. You have shown me your weakness, Kaelin. and I have shown the court your value. You are mine, and I will keep what is mine no matter the cost. As for your sister, Lyra waved a dismissive hand towards the unconscious Alara. She is now a prisoner, a guest. She is the final thread of your humanity. Keep it safe, Kaelin. Because if you ever try to leave again, I will snap that thread myself. With a nod to Silas, who scrambled forward, Lyra commanded, take the human sister to the highest tower. Guard her life with your own. And take my anchor, Kaelin, back to my chambers. He is not well, and he needs to be closer to me. As Silas helped the still paralyzed Kaelin away, he glanced back. Queen Lyra was sitting back on her throne, the center of a bloody, silent court. She was looking at him, the expression on her face confirming the terrifying truth. He saved the vampire queen. Now she can't stop thinking about him had escalated from obsession to a ruthless, dangerous, and very public power struggle. He was now permanently entangled in the fate of the Crimson Empire. The psychic connection, the knot of souls, had evolved from a tight leash to an intrusive, pervasive presence. Back in Lyra's chambers, now truly their shared space, Kaelin felt her emotions like his own. The searing triumph of having publicly humiliated Valerius, the cold satisfaction of possessing Kaelin, and beneath it all, a deep, ancient loneliness that pulsed with need. He was no longer paralyzed, but the attempt to break free in the grand hall had left him drained and raw. He sat in the private antechamber, the dark, carved door leading to the main bedroom closed. He was a sentinel, a trophy, and a captive all at once. Lyra eventually emerged from the inner rooms, shedding her ornate armor. She wore a simple gown of deep crimson silk, a startling contrast to her pale skin, and her movements were liquid grace. She looked younger, less the ancient queen and more the dangerous, magnetic woman. She didn't speak immediately. Instead, she poured a glass of dark red wine, or something that looked like it, and held it out to him. You risked death for her, Lyra said, her voice softer than he had ever heard it, devoid of command, tinged with a strange, aching curiosity. Your sister. Why? Kaelin took the glass, his fingers brushing hers, an electrical spark that tightened the knot between them. He felt a sudden, confusing rush of tenderness from her, quickly masked by disdain. She is my family, Kaelin replied simply, meeting her intense gaze. My blood. My responsibility. Lyra took a slow, deliberate sip from her own glass, her crimson eyes never leaving his. Family. A mortal weakness. Valerius used it to exploit the bond, to prove you were still human. She stepped closer, making the air crackle with her power. I exiled him. Not for betraying me, betrayal is the language of this court, but for daring to threaten my possession. Your life is now tethered to mine, Kaelin. Your survival is literally paramount to my own continued rule. She reached out and traced the sharp line of his collarbone, right above the dark silk of his borrowed tunic. But the bond also makes me feel your desire for her safety, your pure, relentless devotion. It is a powerful emotion, Kaelin. Almost beautiful. And it is entirely dedicated to someone else. Her touch sent a confusing mix of fear and an undeniable, forbidden warmth through him. He was a hunter, she was the queen of his enemies, yet the bond made her touch feel dangerously right. You call it beautiful, Kaelin challenged, his voice steady despite the rush in his blood. But you caged her. She is bait. She is protection, Lyra corrected, her voice hardening. Against your own foolish impulse for freedom. If you attempt to flee, I will know. The bond will tell me. And then I will bring her here and make her watch as I break every last piece of the mortal that still clings to you. She gave him a dark, possessive look. Understand this, I do not want a broken thrall. I want the fierce, foolish courage of the man who risked everything to save me. I want the human who is now intrinsically tied to my soul. She turned away, walking to the balcony that overlooked the perpetually dark valley. The court is in disarray. Valerius's exile has created a vacuum. I need to reassert my dominance. And you, Kaelin, will stand by my side. You are the symbol of my power, the living proof that I cannot be defeated. Tonight, we attend the Shadow Gala. Kaelin pushed himself to his feet. I am a mortal. A human hunter. I will not be your performing dog. Lyra didn't even turn around. You misunderstand the terms of the bond, my dear Kaelin. You don't have a choice. When I feel the need for you to be near, your body will obey. And currently, she finally turned, a predatory glint in her eyes, I am feeling a profound and insistent need for you to be closer. Before Kaelin could resist, a jolt of psychic energy, not painful but irresistibly compelling, hit him. His legs moved without conscious thought. He found himself walking towards her, drawn like iron to a magnet. He stopped inches from her back, the heat of her immortal body and the silk of her gown a searing temptation. Lyra reached back, her cold hand finding his, bringing it around her waist. It was a clear, possessive gesture, a political statement dressed in desire. "Good boy," she purred, her head leaning back to rest briefly against his shoulder, a moment of startling vulnerability that the bond magnified tenfold. In his mind, he felt a flash of her exhaustion, her responsibility, and the quiet, ancient yearning for a true connection. The knot didn't just share obsession, it shared everything. "Now," she continued, her voice resuming its queenly tone, "prepare yourself. The Shadow Gala is a gathering of the most powerful and ruthless beings in the Empire. They will try to gauge your weakness, Kaelin. They will try to provoke you. You will do nothing but stand silently, a testament to my absolute control. Your life depends on it." As she led him out into the chilling magnificence of the Citadel, Kaelin knew the true danger wasn't Valerius plotting from the shadows. It was the slow, insidious rot of the Knot of Souls, blurring the lines between his mortal hatred and Lyra's immortal, forbidden desire. He was walking into a nest of vipers, bound to the Queen Viper herself, and he was starting to fear that the greatest enemy was the sudden, alarming thrum of her presence in his own heart. The Grand Hall was transformed for the Shadow Gala. It was an intimidating spectacle of opulence and darkness. Rivers of obsidian flowed down staircases, illuminated by the flickering red and black light of enchanted crystals. The air was thick with the scent of dark incense and the buzzing, cold power of hundreds of high-ranking vampires. Lyra, magnificent and imposing, stood at the hall's entrance, Kaelin rigidly at her side. He could feel the weight of every eye in the room on him, a palpable mix of hostility and disbelief. He was the only mortal present, an anomaly, and a symbol of the Queen's radical, unstable behavior. His grip tightened unconsciously on the hilt of his father's sword, which Lyra had allowed him to keep, likely as a psychological tether to his past and a cruel reminder of the life he had lost. "Be still," Lyra murmured, her voice barely a breath, but the Knot of Souls translated the command directly into his consciousness. "Show no weakness. They feed on it." As they moved through the crowd, Lyra offered Kaelin's presence as a deliberate provocation. She made sure he was seen, his arm held firmly in the crook of hers, a constant display of possession. He felt a deep surge of Lyra's contempt for her court, and an unsettling flash of pride in his own human defiance. The bond was rapidly becoming a two-way mirror. A tall, ancient vampire named Countess Seraphina, a creature with eyes like milky quartz and a gown of living shadow, approached them with a mocking smile. "My queen," Seraphina purred, dropping into a shallow, cynical curtsy. "We are all quite delighted by your recovery, and quite fascinated by your little companion. Immortal? In the Blood Court? Such audacity." Her eyes swept over Kaelin, a cold, probing gaze that felt like a needle trying to find a weak point. "Kaelin is my anchor, Seraphina," Lyra replied, her voice smooth and devoid of emotion. "He is essential to my continued reign. Treat him with the respect you afford my own heart." Seraphina's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Of course, Your Majesty. But we all remember Lord Valerius's rather dramatic exit. Surely the Queen's chosen consort will not remain vacant for long. Such a powerful throne requires a true companion of the blood." She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a seductive whisper aimed at Lyra. "The court is abuzz with the notion that a queen without a consort is a queen vulnerable to challenge." Kaelin felt a rush of raw, protective anger from Lyra. Seraphina was openly questioning her stability and legitimacy, implying that a human anchor was not enough. "Seraphina," Lyra hissed, her crimson eyes suddenly blazing. "Valerius's ambition blinded him. I require no true companion to rule. I have all the power I need." "Kaelin," she commanded, tightening her grip on him, a public act of dominance, remind the Countess of the bond. The psychic command was overwhelming. Kaelin felt a sudden electric surge of Lyra's power coursing through the knot and into his own body. He was compelled to act, to demonstrate their unnatural connection. He couldn't speak, but he could meet Seraphina's challenging gaze. He raised his free hand, placing it on Lyra's back, a mirroring gesture of intimacy and possession. As he did so, Lyra focused her ancient magic and Kaelin felt the world tilt. For a blinding moment, his eyes, still intensely human, seemed to flash with the vivid, aggressive crimson of Lyra's own. The knot was briefly activated to its maximum potential, displaying the raw psychic overlap between them. Countess Seraphina gasped, visibly recoiling. The brief, intense display of the shared power, the blurring of mortal and immortal essence, was undeniable. The court murmured in awe and terror. "My apologies, Your Majesty," Seraphina muttered, dropping a deeper, far more genuine curtsy this time. "The bond's power is astonishing. I withdraw my statement." She retreated hastily into the shadows. Lyra gave Kaelin a small, satisfied, almost intimate smile. Well done, little anchor, her thought echoed in his mind, sharp and triumphant. But the display had cost Kalen. The sudden flood of dark energy left him weak, trembling slightly, and the seductive closeness of Lyra, the sharing of her triumph, made the boundary between them dangerously thin. He felt a deep, complex satisfaction in defending her, a feeling that terrified him more than Seraphina's malice. Just then, as Lyra moved on, a cloaked figure detached from the wall, moving swiftly into Kalen's path. He was shorter than the other vampires, older, and his movements were jerky, unnatural. His eyes, devoid of any light, settled on Kalen. Kalen, the human, the figure rasped, his voice ancient and dry as bone dust. I have a message for you from the exiled one. Before Lyra could react, the figure quickly produced a small, silver filigree locket, a familiar object Kalen instantly recognized. This belonged to the sister, the vampire hissed, his voice full of venomous glee. Valerius sends his regards. He says that the queen's protection is merely a temporary cage. He didn't wait for a response. The cloaked vampire brought the locket to his mouth and crushed it with his teeth, the small pieces of metal scattering on the dark floor. Then, before the guards could react, he plunged a short, silver dagger into his own chest, collapsing in a heap. A martyr for Valerius's cause. Lyra was silent, her body rigid with rage. The court was once again plunged into shocked silence. Valerius hadn't just sent a messenger. He had sent a threat disguised as a sacrifice, a public declaration that he could still reach Kalen's most vulnerable point, Ilara. Kalen felt his human rage boil over, cutting through the haze of the bond. The broken locket, Ilara's cherished possession, was the proof that Valerius was still actively targeting her. I need to see her, Kalen pleaded to Lyra, the desperate human breaking through the loyal anchor. Please, Lyra. You promised her safety. Lyra's face was a mask of cold fury, but Kalen felt the panic bubbling beneath her composure. Valerius's move was brilliant. It challenged her authority by publicly threatening her possession, and it exposed her reliance on the human's cooperation. He won't stop, Kalen insisted, his voice low and urgent. You exiled him, you broke his power. You will seek revenge through me. You must let me see Ilara for both our sakes. Lyra looked at the broken locket, then at the dead vampire, and finally into Kalen's pleading human eyes. The bond thrummed, carrying the weight of her political dilemma. She knew Kalen's fear was justified, and his distraction was a vulnerability she could not afford. She gave a curt, almost imperceptible nod. Fine. You will see her. But understand, Kalen, she whispered, her crimson gaze heavy with a renewed, possessive focus. The leash may be long, but it is still mine. You will not try to save her. Not yet. You will simply confirm her safety. That is all. She turned, addressing the stunned court with regal, cold authority. This interruption is concluded. Valerius is a ghost, and his pathetic thralls are nothing more than dust. The gala continues. But the night had shifted. Valerius had made his move, challenging Lyra's power and exposing Kalen's enduring human heart. Kalen now had a dual mission: survive the court and find a way to protect Ilara from the exiled lord, all while fighting the creeping, seductive desire of the queen who needed him closer than her own shadow. The highest tower of the citadel was a cold, lonely spire, far removed from the lavish darkness of the queen's chambers. The journey there was brief, escorted by Silas, the nervous thrall, and two silent, towering vampire guards. Lyra did not accompany them, but Kalen felt her presence acutely, a constant, heavy awareness that pressed on his mind, ensuring he knew she was watching every thought, every tremor of emotion. The chamber where Ilara was held was sparse but clean, with a single high window overlooking the dark, desolate plains. Ilara sat curled on a stone bench, pale and small, wearing the same simple tunic she'd had on when Valerius's guards captured her. When she saw Kalen, her eyes widened in a mixture of relief and terror. She jumped up, running towards him. Kalen. Her voice was a choked sob. She threw her arms around him, clinging to him desperately. Kalen held her tight, the feel of her warm, beating heart against his chest a painful reminder of his own endangered humanity. The raw, unconditional love he felt for her was a necessary defiance against the bond. Such blatant, messy affection, Lyra's thought, sharp with disdain, echoed in his mind. It is distracting. Conclude this quickly, Kalen. He ignored the mental intrusion, pulling back slightly to look at Ilara. Are you hurt? Did they touch you? No, she whispered, shaking her head. Just fear. They brought me here right after. Right after you freed the queen. They said I was a bargaining chip. What is happening, Kalen? Who are these monsters? He looked pointedly at the silent guards and Silas, who was fidgeting nervously. He had to be cautious. Everything he said would reach Lyra. Ilara, he said, keeping his voice steady, I am safe. You're safe. The woman who rules this place, Queen Lyra, she saved my life. And she is protecting me, and you. She exiled the monster who captured you. Illyra's eyes flickered to the door, then back to him, her brows knitted in confusion. But you're a prisoner, Kaelin. Your clothes, your eyes, there's something wrong. I can feel it. What did she do to you? I am bound to her, Kaelin admitted, choosing his words carefully. An ancient bond. It ensures my loyalty and my safety. But it also means I cannot leave. Not until I find a way to break it. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small, tarnished silver amulet, not the one Valerius destroyed but another keepsake. I need you to be strong, Illyra. You must wait here. Do not try to escape. It will endanger you and it will destroy me. He pressed the amulet into her hand. Hold on to your defiance, Illyra. Hold on to your humanity. It's the last piece of light we have. He felt Lyra's sharp impatience grow through the knot, a spike of mental irritation. He was pushing his luck. I have to go, he said, pulling her into a quick, final embrace. I will find a way. Before Illyra could say anything more, Kaelin turned and walked towards the door, stopping only to face Silas. Ensure her comfort, Silas. She is the most important human in this citadel. If anything happens to her, the Queen will know. Silas, terrified of both the Queen's wrath and Valerius's shadow, nodded vigorously. Of course, Kaelin. I swear on my life. As Kaelin was led away, the door closing with a heavy thud, he felt Illyra's sorrow and fear acutely, but mixed in was a spark of hope. The exchange had refueled his own resolve. He had to break the bond not just for his own freedom but for his sister's life. When he returned to Lyra's chambers, the Queen was waiting by the large window, staring out into the night. She didn't turn, but her voice was cold, laced with disapproval. A performance of unnecessary sentiment, Lyra commented, clearly having witnessed the entire exchange through the knot. You endangered us both, Kaelin. Your raw devotion to her is a weakness Valerius will constantly exploit. Kaelin walked up behind her, maintaining a careful distance. And your need for me to be anchored is a weakness he already knows. He met her gaze in the reflection of the glass. I needed to see she was alive. Now I know the stakes. The bond won't break my loyalty to her, Lyra. It will only increase my determination to find a way to sever this connection without killing us both. Lyra finally turned, her crimson eyes blazing with challenge. You believe you can sever the knot of souls? It is a merging of eternal and mortal power, Kaelin. It is unique. It is forever. She advanced on him, her movements slow, deliberate, and undeniably seductive. Why fight it, Kaelin? You have traded a desperate, impoverished life for a seat beside the most powerful throne in this world. You have my protection. You have my absolute focus. She stood inches away, the scent of musk and power overwhelming him. He felt the bond thrumming intensely, a current of forbidden desire pouring from her into him, trying to drown his resistance. She wanted him to submit, to accept this dangerous, immortal captivity. My heart still beats, Lyra, Kaelin whispered, staring back defiantly. It reminds me I am mortal. And mortals, unlike the immortal, value freedom and choice more than power. Then let me teach you a new value, Kaelin, Lyra murmured, her eyes dropping to his lips. A value that only the eternal can offer. She reached out, placing a cold hand on the back of his neck, the slightest pressure compelling him forward. Kaelin felt the sheer force of her will, the seductive ancient magic trying to override his final resistance. He was a hunter, but he was trapped, pinned down by a force far older and stronger than himself, and the line between fear and attraction blurred into a dangerous, electric haze. The breath Lyra exhaled was cold against his skin, carrying the faint, intoxicating scent of blood and power. Her eyes, fixed on his, were bottomless pits of crimson need. The space between them hummed with the electric tension of the knot of souls, which was currently screaming Lyra's desire directly into Kaelin's heart, trying to drown out his mortal resistance. He felt the ancient, irresistible pull. Lyra was the ultimate predator, and he was the captive she had chosen to cherish. He had spent his life hunting her kind, yet here he stood, utterly captivated by the raw, dangerous beauty of his queen. But the image of Illyra's terrified face in the high tower, and the sight of Valerius's broken locket, were the anchors to his sanity. He couldn't afford to be weak. Submission meant the permanent death of his soul. With a superhuman effort born of pure, desperate defiance, Kaelin did not pull away. Instead, he forced his body to remain still, meeting her gaze with a fierce, unwavering intensity that was entirely his own. You can take my body, Lyra, Kaelin whispered, his voice rough. The bond guarantees that. But you won't take my choice. You want the man who saved you, the one who defied death. If you make me your slave, you will only have a broken toy. Is that what you need to rule an eternal empire? His words struck a nerve. Lyra froze, her hand still resting possessively on his neck. The tide of her dominant desire faltered, replaced by a surge of complex emotions: frustration, contempt for his weakness, and a profound, reluctant respect for his unbreakable will. The bond amplified every feeling, turning the moment into a devastating emotional confrontation. "You are a complication, Kaelin," Lyra hissed, her voice low with ancient fury. She removed her hand abruptly, stepping back as if burned. The sudden physical distance was a welcome reprieve for Kaelin, but the mental bond remained taut, humming with her agitation. "I could snap your will with a thought," she continued, pacing away. "Turn you into a mindless thrall whose only purpose is my pleasure. But I will not. You're right. I want the defiance. I want the humanity that looks at my darkness and still holds its light." She stopped by the balcony, her magnificent figure silhouetted against the dark sky. "Very well. You crave choice? I will give you a taste of responsibility. The Shadow Gala has exposed a fracture in the court. Valerius has sympathizers. They believe a human is a plague upon the throne." She turned, her demeanor shifting back to that of the ruthless queen. "You will be my emissary in the lower courts. You will move through the citadel, observing, listening. Find the whispers of dissent. Uncover Valerius's remaining loyalists. Use your human senses, your empathy, your intuition, to find the traitors. You will report only to me." Kaelin was stunned. This was not the captivity he expected. This was power, limited though it was. And more importantly, it was movement. "Why me?" he asked, genuinely puzzled. "Because the bond allows me to see everything you see, Kaelin," she replied, her crimson eyes gleaming with cunning. "You are my eyes and my ears in the filth. No one will suspect the mortal trophy is actually the Queen's most effective spy. And the proximity of the mission will keep the knot settled. It will keep you close." It was a cage, but one with wide enough bars to allow him to breathe and perhaps to plot. It gave him access to the hidden workings of the Citadel. It gave him a chance to find a way to Alara, and to the knowledge that could break the bond. "And if I find a way to break the bond in the process?" Kaelin challenged, testing her limits. Lyra smiled, a slow, predatory curve of her lips. "Then you are a more powerful mortal than I anticipated, and you will have earned your freedom. Just before I kill you for the audacious betrayal. But until then you serve me, Kaelin. Your mission starts at dawn." She walked to her colossal bed, the crimson silks rustling invitingly. "Now rest. Tomorrow you enter the heart of the Shadow Court. And remember, every fear you feel, every intrigue you uncover, every moment you yearn for your sister. I will feel it too." She lay down, turning her back to him, seemingly dismissing him. But Kaelin knew better. He walked to the antechamber, the separation doing little to diminish her potent presence in his mind. He was no longer just Lyra's anchor, he was her weapon. The game had just become infinitely more deadly. He had to be careful not to fall in love with his chains, or his queen, before he found a way to shatter them both. The shift in Kaelin's routine was immediate and stark. He was no longer confined to the queen's chambers, but the knot of souls remained his constant, invisible chain. As Lyra's designated emissary, he was granted a small, dedicated retinue of silent, neutral guards, vampires who cared more about the queen's stability than court politics. His movement was restricted only by the Citadel's walls and of course by Lyra's relentless psychic presence. His mission was to find the quiet loyalists, those high-ranking members of the court who had supported Valerius's attempted coup but had been savvy enough to stay silent during the public confrontation. Kaelin began his work in the library, a vast, echoing chamber filled with scrolls and tomes written in languages long dead. He was searching for two things: records of those who frequently associated with Valerius, and any mention of the Knot of Souls and its potential weaknesses. He quickly learned that being the Queen's human anchor was both a shield and a magnet. Vampires avoided him out of fear and disdain, but their avoidance was itself a clue. He focused on their reactions using his human empathy, a weakness Lyra had paradoxically made his strength. Unlike the vampires who could mask their bloodlust and fear, Kaelin could read their body language, their subtle recoils, and the precise moment their hostility spiked. He soon identified a small coven, the House of Vikos, led by a baroness named Zarina. Zarina was outwardly loyal, but her psychic signature, amplified by the bond, was a thick, cold smear of resentment and disbelief whenever Kaelin entered a room. The most difficult part was the constant, intrusive stream of Lyra's mind. She didn't micromanage his steps, but she felt everything. When he uncovered a particularly damning piece of evidence, he felt her surge of satisfaction and calculating fury. When he allowed himself a moment of worry for Alara, he felt her sharp impatience and warning to refocus. One evening, Kaelin followed Zarina to the lower levels of the Citadel, the service corridors where the thralls and lesser creatures worked. It was here, amidst the steam and the cold stone, that Zarina met in secret with another vampire, a minor functionary named Silas's brother, who worked in the Citadel's records department. Kaelin hid in the shadows, listening. Zarina spoke in low, venomous whispers. "Valerius is gathering strength in the borderlands," Zarina hissed. "He knows the queen is vulnerable. This mortal anchor is an abomination. He is a crack in the foundation. We must act before Lyra strengthens her hold." "He sent the messenger," her accomplice replied nervously. "The human girl is the key. Valerius's plan is simple. Use the girl to lure the mortal away, or force the queen to destroy her own anchor in a moment of weakness. Then we will help him," Zarina concluded coldly. "We need to plant seeds of dissent within the service corps. The thralls are loyal only to survival. They must believe the mortal's presence brings danger, not stability." Kaelin had what he needed. He had names, a location, the borderlands, and a plan, Ilara as bait. But the conversation also confirmed a horrifying detail. Valerius was not content with merely taking the throne. He intended to destroy Kaelin's bond with Lyra, even if it meant sacrificing Ilara or forcing Lyra to kill Kaelin herself. He returned to Lyra's chambers, the information burning a hole in his mind. He found her standing by a marble pedestal, examining a jeweled dagger. "You are agitated," Lyra observed without turning. "The bond screams your success, Kaelin. And your fear." "I found them," Kaelin reported, dropping the names Zarina and her accomplice. "They are communicating with Valerius. He is in the borderlands. And their plan is to use Ilara to destabilize your rule." Lyra finally turned, her crimson eyes narrowed in predatory focus. Predictable. Valerius always relied on blunt instruments and fear. She placed the dagger on the pedestal. "You have done well, Kaelin. Your human intuition is a remarkable tool." The compliment was both intoxicating and dangerous. It made the bond hum with a satisfying warmth. "What will you do with Zarina?" Kaelin asked. "She will be dealt with," Lyra said dismissively. "But the greater threat is Valerius. He is not merely seeking revenge. He seeks to dismantle the knot of souls itself. He understands that you are the source of my renewed stability. He wants to prove that a mortal cannot be eternal." She walked towards him, her movements fluid. "The time for secrecy is over. I need to strike at Valerius directly before he can execute his plan. And you, Kaelin, will accompany me. You are the bait, the shield, and the weapon." Lyra paused, the air thick with tension. She reached out and placed her cold hand on his chest, right over his beating heart. "You have given me your loyalty, Kaelin. A reluctant, defiant loyalty, but mine nonetheless. Now I will offer you a piece of mine. I will go to the borderlands, Kaelin, but first you will visit Ilara. You will assure her of her immediate safety, and you will say your goodbye." Kaelin's heart pounded against her palm. "Goodbye. We are going to war," Lyra stated simply. "And I cannot predict the outcome. But I know this, if I fall, the bond will shatter and my power will die with me. Valerius will then destroy everything I cherish, including your sister. Go, Kaelin. Tell her what she needs to hear. And then return to me. Our journey begins at sundown." The concession was enormous. Lyra was allowing him a genuine, emotional farewell, an act of trust and vulnerability that the bond amplified with startling clarity. Kaelin felt the fierce, possessive love of the queen, woven with the cold, hard logic of a ruler who knew that a loyal anchor was more valuable than a desperate one. He now knew his fate was sealed, to fight by the side of the vampire queen, against the dark threat of Valerius, for his own soul and his sister's life. The visit to Ilara in the high tower felt different this time. The vampire guards were still posted, and Silas, the jittery thrall, stood near the door, but the atmosphere was thick with a heavy, unspoken finality. Kaelin knew Lyra was watching not just through the bond but perhaps through magic as well. This was a test of his obedience and a painful final concession to his humanity. Ilara was waiting, her face etched with worry. When she saw him, her eyes searched his, looking past his borrowed finery and straight into his soul. "You look like them, Kaelin," she whispered as he approached, her voice shaking. Pale and coiled. "What did she do to you in those chambers?" Kaelin took her hands, his grip firm. He had to convey everything quickly, without alarming the watchful eyes or rousing Lyra's suspicion in the bond. "I'm still me, Ilara," he assured her, forcing a steady look. "But the bond is tightening. Valerius is still out there. He knows you are my vulnerability. Lyra is taking me with her to the borderlands to hunt him down, to end this threat once and for all." Ilara's eyes widened in terror. "You're going to war? With her? Kaelin, you can't. You're human. This is her fight. We need to find a way out together." "There is no together, not now," Kaelin said, his voice raw with the truth he couldn't hide. If I try to escape, Lyra will break the bond and we will both die. If I stay here, Valerius will find a way to use you, and she will be forced to choose between the Empire and my safety. I have to go, Alara. I have to be her shield and her weapon. It's the only way to keep you alive and to give myself a chance to find the knowledge to break this thing. He pulled her closer, his voice dropping to a fierce whisper that only she could hear. Listen to me, Alara. I gave you the amulet. It's charmed, it won't break the bond, but it will slightly dull Lyra's ability to read your mind. You have to use this time. Find the libraries, the old records, talk to Silas. Look for anything on the Knot of Souls or ancient blood curses. You are safe here, but you are not idle. You are my last free agent. Alara stared at him, the terror slowly giving way to a fierce, familiar resolve. She was her brother's sister. You want me to be your spy while you're hers? I want you to be my hope, Kaelin corrected. Stay alive, stay human, and stay ready. When I break the bond, I need you to be the one I come back to. He pulled her into a final, crushing embrace. He pressed his face into her hair, memorizing the scent of her, the feel of her fragile human warmth. This was his goodbye, and he knew with a sinking dread that he might never feel this kind of pure, untainted love again. Enough, Lyra's thought sliced through the bond, a cold, sharp blade of impatience. The sentiment has served its purpose. Return to me now, Kaelin. Kaelin released Alara, stepping back. He didn't look at her face again, fearing his own resolve would crumble. I love you, Alara, he said simply, his voice thick. Don't die, she commanded, her eyes shining with unshed tears. Don't let her take your soul, Kaelin. He nodded once, turned and walked out, leaving his sister, his only remaining link to his true life, behind in the cold, high tower. Back in Lyra's chamber, the queen was ready for travel. She wore practical, dark leather armor, her crimson wings neatly folded. She looked lethal. Kaelin walked up to her, his face a mask of resolute control, but inside, the pain of the farewell throbbed intensely. Lyra instantly felt it. The pain of separation is exquisite, Kaelin, Lyra murmured, tracing the line of his jaw with a cold, pale finger. But temporary. Soon, the bond will teach you that my presence is the only comfort you require. She saw the defiance still burning in his eyes, the remnants of his devotion to Alara, and she made a choice. She stepped closer, closing the distance completely. Her other hand reached up and settled at the base of his neck, her thumb brushing the sensitive skin below his ear. Before we leave, she whispered, her voice low and dangerously seductive, let me remind you what you are fighting for and what you are fighting against. The bond surged. Lyra didn't use the paralyzing force of her power. Instead, she used the temptation. She pulled Kaelin against her, his human body pressed against the cold, hard curves of her armor. Then she kissed him. It was not a gentle kiss. It was an overwhelming assertion of power, a flood of immortal passion, a claim of ownership. Kaelin felt the sheer age and hunger of the vampire queen in that kiss, the desperate, lonely yearning of an ancient being who had finally found her anchor. The knot of souls exploded, melding their sensations, their thoughts, their forbidden desire into a single blinding moment. He tasted metal and fire, power and a terrifying, sweet vulnerability. For that agonizing second, Kaelin forgot Alara, forgot his mission, forgot his hatred, and only felt the addictive, consuming pull of his queen. She broke the kiss as abruptly as she started it, leaving Kaelin breathless and reeling, his body trembling, his own desire a shocking, undeniable betrayal of his soul. Lyra looked at him, her eyes dark with triumph and a flicker of self-contempt. Do you feel it now, Kaelin? The forbidden desire? That is the reward for your loyalty. That is the new nature of the bond. Now come. We hunt the exiled lord. She grabbed his hand, her touch now intensely personal, and together, the human emissary and the vampire queen, walked out of the citadel, leaving the silent court and the confined sister behind, bound for the borderlands and the final confrontation with Valerius. The true battle for Kaelin's soul had just begun. The journey to the borderlands was swift and brutal. Lyra moved with the efficiency of an ancient war commander, her crimson wings a blur against the perpetually dim skies. She held Kaelin close, the act a mixture of physical necessity and the persistent pull of the knot of souls. They traveled alone, Lyra trusting no one else, and the silence between them was only broken by the rush of the wind and the constant, unnerving presence of their shared thoughts. Kaelin was no longer just a passive captive. The kiss had irrevocably altered the dynamic. His mortal body now betrayed him, responding to Lyra's proximity with a terrifying blend of adrenaline and genuine, forbidden excitement. He felt her power, her cold certainty, and the deep, possessive love she had for him, an emotion so vast and consuming that it threatened to eclipse his own identity. You tremble, Kaelin, Lyra's voice echoed in his mind, devoid of judgment, fear, or excitement. The bond is confused. It is neither, Kalen projected back, focusing on the image of Alara's face to maintain his psychic boundary. It is the awareness that I am bound to a beautiful monster who will destroy the world if it means keeping me. Lyra's response was a sharp, satisfied surge of pride. And yet you are here. My monster. My world. They reached a remote, fortified keep on the edge of the Crimson Empire, a forgotten outpost that Valerius had used as his base. The keep was silent, too silent. Was a trap. Lyra landed gracefully on the battlements, releasing Kalen but keeping him tethered by the bond. He waits inside, she stated, drawing a wicked, curved silver blade. Valerius is desperate. He knows I cannot be defeated by force alone. He will try to break the bond. Then let me be the distraction, Kalen suggested, drawing his own sword, the familiar weight of the hunter's steel a comforting contrast to the cold stone beneath his feet. He wants me. Use me as bait. When he focuses on the anchor, you strike the consort. Lyra paused, genuinely considering his tactical mind. A bold move, mortal. And highly dangerous. But you are correct. He will underestimate you. She gave him a look of fierce protectiveness. Stay within the perimeter of my power, Kalen. If I feel the bond weakening, I will end this quickly, even if it costs me the throne. They entered the keep. The main hall was empty, but Valerius's voice, amplified by dark magic, echoed from the shadows. Welcome, Lyra. And Kalen. I expected your arrival. I see the little human is still your favorite trophy. Tell me, Lyra, how does it feel to have your immortality anchored to a weak, beating heart? Valerius stepped out, flanked by a dozen heavily armed, exiled vampires. He looked far more dangerous now, powered by pure, unbridled malice. Your exile ends here, Valerius, Lyra hissed, her blade raised. Your betrayal ends now. No, Lyra, Valerius sneered, his eyes flicking to Kalen. Your reign ends here. I found the ancient key to your little bond, Kalen. I found the counter-ritual. It requires two things, proximity to the anchor and a focus of pure, human despair. Valerius clapped his hands. From a side corridor, two of his strongest guards dragged a familiar, fragile figure. Silas, the thrall who had guarded Alara. Silas's eyes were wide with terror, his small body trembling. Where is she, Valerius? Kalen roared, taking a step forward, his fear for Alara surging through the bond. Valerius laughed, a cruel, cold sound. The sister is safe for now, but I have her protector. And I have found a truth you both ignore. To be mortal in this world is to know despair. And Silas, it seems, has just heard some rather distressing news about the human girl in the tower. Valerius pressed a blade to Silas's throat. Silas, tell the queen and her dog what you have just learned about the fate of Alara. Silas, trembling violently, forced out the words. Lord Valerius's agents. They found the secondary exit to the tower. She is gone. She escaped, Lyra. She left the citadel. The news hit Kalen like a physical wave. Alara was gone. The protective cage he had relied on was empty. His raw fear and despair for his sister, now loose in a world of vampires, became a psychic scream. The knot of souls exploded with agonizing intensity. Lyra staggered, clutching her head, the powerful influx of Kalen's despair overwhelming her. Her eternal power was instantly fractured by the sheer force of his human pain. Valerius saw his chance. There. The bond is breaking. Destroy the anchor and the queen falls. The exiled vampires surged forward. Valerius aimed directly for Kalen, his goal clear. Break the knot. Lyra, fighting through the psychic agony, screamed Kalen's name. Kalen, fight it. Your despair is killing us both. Focus. Live. Kalen was reeling, his mind consumed by the image of Alara in danger. The bond was tearing and Lyra's power was draining rapidly. He was losing control. But then Lyra's most dominant emotion cut through the chaos. A surge of possessive, fierce love and a singular, desperate command. Choose me, Kalen. Choose life. Choose us. In that moment of ultimate crisis, Kalen made his final, terrifying choice. He let go of his despair for Alara. He accepted the forbidden pull of the bond. He accepted Lyra. Instead of fighting the pain, Kalen embraced the psychic connection, forcing his mind to accept the merge. He focused not on Alara's freedom but on Lyra's need. His human will, the same will that had defied her earlier, now chose to anchor her completely. The bond didn't break, it fused. Kalen's crimson eyes, the ones Lyra had briefly invoked at the gala, blazed to full, terrifying life. A wave of merged energy, Lyra's eternal power amplified by Kalen's mortal defiance, rippled outwards, slamming into Valerius and his guards. Lyra instantly strengthened, moved with lightning speed. She met Valerius in a clash of steel and magic. Kalen, now moving with inhuman speed and precision, his human sword an extension of Lyra's power, engaged the exiled guards. He fought like a vampire with Lyra's sight and speed, but with the ruthless, protective fury of a human. Valerius was outmatched. The power flowing between Lyra and Kaelin was absolute, an eternal darkness anchored by a passionate heart. Lyra drove her silver blade deep into Valerius's chest, her victory cry a triumphant shriek that resonated through the bond. Valerius collapsed, his last breath a curse. You chose the monster. You will be eternal, and alone. As the battle ended, Lyra turned to Kaelin, who was breathing heavily, his own sword stained with vampire blood. The crimson glow in his eyes faded, leaving them intensely, startlingly clear. She walked towards him, the victor, the queen, her expression a mixture of awe and fierce devotion. You chose the knot, she whispered, her voice husky. You chose us. Kaelin looked down at the blood on his hands, the mortal symbol of his eternal decision. He was no longer just the savior. He was the anchor, the emissary, and now the consort in all but title. He walked to the trembling Silas, who was huddled on the floor, weeping. Where did she go, Silas? Kaelin asked, his voice calm, terrifyingly devoid of the panic he should feel. Silas pointed a shaking finger north. The old hunter trails, towards the coast. She was looking for ancient lore, the way to break the queen. Kaelin nodded. Elara had not run in despair, she had run on a mission. She had taken his advice, becoming his hope and his spy. She was looking for a way to save him from the decision he had just made. Lyra approached, her hand settling possessively on his shoulder. She is no longer your concern, Kaelin. The bond is sealed. You are eternal. You are mine. Now we go home. To our throne. To our kingdom. Kaelin met her crimson gaze, the forbidden desire now a shared, undeniable reality. He had saved the vampire queen, and now he was bound to her forever. He had his eternal life and his queen's love, but he had traded his humanity and his freedom for the throne. He knew he had to rule by her side, maintaining their precarious balance of power and passion, all while knowing that somewhere out there, his own human sister, Elara, was actively searching for the only thing that could kill him, the key to break the knot of souls. He had chosen. And his new, eternal struggle had just begun.